we get started? So we're going to start, no surprise, with how did it go with customer discovery last week? And I'm just going to try. I can't actually look at everybody, but I'm going to ask for hands up as we did last time. And Ahmed, maybe you can give me a count since I can't see it all. But how many of you are able to complete 5 interviews, customer discovery interviews? Hands up. Okay, no hands up. Ahmed, do you see any hands up?
1.
1, okay. I take it nobody did more than 5. Did anyone do more than 5? Hands up? No, okay. Let's see, I think the average was 3 last time. Oh, good. Stephen, you did more than 5?
Yeah, we did like over 10.
Excellent. I think you're going to get the gold star and the bottle of wine or whatever they're offering for this. Why don't you?
Wei will be my spokesperson.
Oh, okay. All right. He's going to tell you how it went, or tell us how it went. Well,
Yeah.
Wei has that unfair advantage of he's been through this, right? So we like that. Wei, do you want to tell us a bit about what you learned, what was surprising as you did this?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so we did actually a bunch, and I was, joking with Stephen that I have met more doctors in the past 2-3 weeks in my life, than any time before this, and so if I can just kind of categorize the people we have interviewed, I would say, we interviewed some people that, sort of like entrepreneur and who had experience in starting up companies, including a person that they made, offer when I just fresh, graduated from MIT, but I didn't take it. But he sold the company, so I kind of regretted it a little bit later. But I kept in contact with him, so I interviewed him, and people like that. And we also interview a lot of physicians who are sort of part of the decision-making process for a diagnostic or early detection tests. So one thing that we haven't really done much is to really, like you said, walk out the building and just interview whoever, right? Like the real consumers. But I think, we will do that and eventually. So,
well, tell me what did you learn anything surprising, or was it all just reinforcing what you already knew?
I think a lot of them are reinforcing, but as you can see, physicians who treat cancer and physicians who prevent cancer, they have slightly different perspectives. I think yesterday we had a great interview with like the prevention person, and what we learned was actually very, very encouraging and reinforcing, because people always talk about the sensitivity and specificity of a test, and when you interview physicians, I think because they are not really in the prevention, that they already the patient already has cancer and they treat them, so they don't really emphasize more about high sensitivity. I think they emphasize more on specificity because they want to make sure the person is actually sick. But the prevention side is kind of the opposite. So the person we interviewed actually said that she's willing to sacrifice on specificity just for great sensitivity. Because false negative creates a kind of a false sense of security, and that's really not good, right? If you do this at the population level, and a lot of people think they don't have cancer, but the truth is they do. That's not a good thing. So that's a little surprising to hear, but we like it, of course, because that's what our technology has the strongest suit at. And now we learn about different business models, like, all kind of like insurance, reimbursement, related issue. But yeah, I think, we pretty much sort of vetted the market size and the level of interest, potential customers, all these physicians, what kind of problems they face, right? And usually we came in with the open-ended discussion, without just telling them, okay, we have this, and what do you think? We just kind of ask them, what do you want, right? In your profession, in your, either treating patient or detecting cancer, what is the like a dream thing you want, if we can make it happen. So I think we got fairly, good feedback, and it's very reinforcing, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Well, that's great that you had some learning here. I really want you to get out of the building, as we say, and get away from everybody that you know.
Right.
But it was a start, and you've had that unfair advantage of having gone through Lean Launchpad, right? ICOR. So so you know how to do this, and perhaps you can be a resource to your colleagues here who are perhaps having a hard time getting started on it. So anyway, congrats on getting 10 interviews, or more than 10.
No, I think, Stephen, I mean, the fact that he works there makes the biggest, difference, because if I just randomly email to 10 doctors, I luckily I get one reply,
Sure.
But
And
when he
that's the way
does
it
that,
is.
he gets like 100%, that's just
Yeah.
amazing. I think this is the unfair advantage.
Yeah, totally. Well, that's what networking is all about, right? And you've got someone in place who can say, just go to this guy and that guy and do the intros. But, not everybody has that network. And then you have to be a little more creative and use LinkedIn and professional associations, even if you don't know the person. And, hey, I read your paper on such and such and would really like to talk to you about whatever, that kind of stuff. Because you're all professionals, you're all at a high level, and you can use that and get to other professionals as well. So
I just want to have to say that we did go outside the building a little bit. I mean, not literally out of the street, but we did go outside of the MD Anderson. So from one of our interviews, we got a referral to someone in Boston Medical Center. So we actually had an interview with that person yesterday. Went fantastic, actually. I think very, very excellent. I mean, that's the thing, like Wei said, very open-ended, because he's actually a screening person as well, very interested. His whole research, he runs the national trial in cancer screening of lung cancer. And so we've kind of talked to him about what he's doing and what we like in a test and all and so yeah, it was very open-ended, and so really gave some reinforcing feedback on what they would like to see, for screening technology. Yeah. So that was really, really good. Yeah.
Great. And that, just to reinforce that technique of asking people that you do get to, who else would you recommend that I speak with? You've been so incredibly helpful. I'd love to talk to some people outside MD Anderson. Do you know anybody in some other centers or whatever? So every interview should lead you to 2 or 3 more interviews. That's on your agenda. Great, thank you for sharing that. Is there anyone else who'd like to volunteer either what was hard about doing this or any tips they have for people? Who wants to give us a little feedback?
Can I ask you some question?
Yes, of course.
So I missed your previous lectures, so maybe you have addressed this. So I think for Stevens, like the Arduino device, maybe it's a little bit easier to identify customers. But generally for therapeutics, we know that our end users are patients, but they are not the check writer, right? So when we have a company, we have product. Either we talk to the venture capitalists or angels, or the big farmers, potentially they want to license or in-license or in whatever ways of the business model. But if you deal with these people, they are busy and it's hard to reach them. How would you do this kind of interview? There is no, like, if I reach out to patients, maybe I can reach out even for doctors, with the advantage of MD Anderson, we can talk to 5 people, 10 people, even 20 patients a day. But with the CEOs, the venture capital, the principals, I mean, there is no way to interview like 1 or 2 each day, or several each day or each week. Maybe the schedule can be several months later. So how do you deal with this kind of situation?
Sure, thanks for that question. So first of all, you should not be interviewing investors and angels. They are not your market. They're money, but they want to know what you know about the market. So wrong target. So just forget them. You're right. You're not going to be able to get to them. And patients are fairly useless because of course they want anything that's going to help them, and they're not paying, and doctors aren't paying either. So where's the money going to come from if you want to progress your company? And the answer for you is probably pharmaceutical companies. Right there, if you can get some sort of a deal with a pharma and they can pay for your development work, or potentially maybe someday even buy you, it's pharma that you're targeting. So that's where
this is also depends on the business model, right? So if you want to read in-license, sell it to pharma, pharma will be your customer. But if you want to start an independent company, then the venture capitalist would be your.
No, again, investors are never your market. If you want to start an independent company, you still are going to need pharma. You are not going to build the development organization to do everything that pharma does, and the marketing organization to get it out there that pharma's already got. So you don't have to sell it to them, but almost everybody collaborates at some level. They get some sort of a relationship where pharma, or it could be big biotech, moves the program along and can fill in the gaps that you're going to have as a small startup. And because pharma is so hungry for novelty and they can't seem to get it right themselves, they're very interested in finding out what's out there that they might potentially license. You might just license it to them. You might decide, I'm never going to do my own thing, but why don't I just license this off, and I'll start a different project and take it as far along as I can, and then license that. So, because we need hundreds of millions of dollars, unless we're doing an orphan drug, we are sort of beholden to a partner who's going to fund all that. And it's almost never venture. All these companies that have raised a lot of venture capital, they're going to partner with pharma as well. You can take a look at Vir Bio, which is an infectious disease company that was started with a huge amount of money from venture capital, and they're partnering their programs after they invested early on. So pharma is the target.
But how to reach out to these people? Even in pharma, you have to talk to their CEOs, or the
no, not CEOs. You go way down. You go into the drug discovery people. The senior manager or director of some piece of drug discovery, oncology drug discovery, and find out what their needs are. Just listen to them. So, that's where you're going to be selling the program, into R&D. And so it's the scientists you need to talk to. They're the ones who are going to make the suggestions. The CEO doesn't have any clue what's going on way down in the ranks. But the oncology R&D people know what their needs are and what they have and don't have. So that's where I would start. How do you reach them? Well, this is networking. Nobody's going to hand you contacts. You have to figure it out. So that's why I suggest things like LinkedIn and going to conferences where these people are. There are lots of conferences that go on, at scientific conference where people are presenting, and maybe there are some networking sessions. If you don't know anybody in your network, then you just have to go out there and it's not easy, but use your contacts.
Yeah, so Stephanie, actually, so Xuxing, there's usually an MSL for every company that works at MD Anderson, or pretty much at every institution. That's who you reach out to, and they actually all know all their contacts, and that's how I, for another, just recently we, in my lab we look at a target, and so we actually got in front of AZ's, the scientific group, to really discuss in terms of their interest in target development of the particular target that was developed in my lab. And so, yeah, no, you just get, they actually have specific R&D groups that you would talk to.
This is MSL is licensing group?
Those are medical science liaisons. These are people who are kind of work in MD Anderson or in any institution. Really, they're like the lowest in the group. They do kind of try to create connections between physicians and the company, and so they know all their contacts. They know the people who are global for pharmaceutical development, for clinical development, as well as scientific development. You just can't, and they will create the connection.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's good to start.
Great. That's perfect. Thank you for mentioning that. Okay, well, we need to move on. I would love if everyone would put in the chat sort of what's been their biggest barrier to getting this done. I'd like to learn from you what, so maybe I can teach you better next time, why it's been difficult for you to get more interviews. They are really so critical. And as you will learn in this piece on investment I'm going to do, that's something that investors want to see as well. They want to see that you really understand your market. And you don't get that by reading a bunch of market research studies. You get that by going out and talking to people. So at least here in Silicon Valley, this is such a well-accepted technique that people are looking for it. It's like, well, did you talk to your market? How many interviews did you do? And so on. And it becomes very clear as you present, when you can present in a pitch and say, we spoke to 50 people in our target market, our people in R&D and pharma and so on. This is what they told us their needs are, and we have the solution to that. That's a powerful statement, as opposed to, we think we're going to be able to get 10% of the market based on nothing. So again, I just really encourage you to follow up on this, even though it's difficult. And I see a question about LinkedIn. LinkedIn, LinkedIn is important, and you can, go to people that you have no idea about and say to them, I saw your profile on LinkedIn. I'm also a blah, blah, blah. And I would appreciate connecting with you for a few minutes. I'm looking into a new approach in oncology and would love to learn from you. And, I haven't done it for a while because I have a pretty good network of people that I know. But when I did it, I was amazed that people would respond, complete strangers, and they would give me their time, and then they would say, well, we really should do something together. So it was very productive, and in ways that I couldn't have guessed. So I would encourage you to do that. Kara, I understand it's hard to schedule things. Thank you for that feedback. Yes, people are busy and so on. And I don't know what to tell you. Maybe you can go in through an admin and say, I'm really trying to schedule with Rob, and I'm on a deadline for this project, and is there a chance I could get 15 minutes of his time in the next week, and just see how that goes. It's like, don't just take no for an answer, and keep going.
It's funny because I had a guy call me twice to tell me that he doesn't have time to interview.
Seriously, he called you? I love it.
Twice, and all he had to do is respond to my email.
Right. Well, I mean, that would be the time to grab him, even though he says he doesn't have time. He's like,
you can ask Sarah. We were just starting our meeting with Sarah and Enrique when my phone rang. This was like yesterday or the day before. It was really funny.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, if he was interested enough to call you, I would have just, I would have postponed the meeting here and just said, look, I got to grab this guy while I can, and just have a few, even if you only get literally the 15 minutes you're asking for, that's better than nothing. So,
yeah. Well, he was calling to tell me I can't talk.
Yeah,
that's what was crazy.
Well, then, then you just, but you use that opportunity to say, well, look, would it work for you to talk at after 6 sometime, or is there a break you've got in your day, or, I could be available at 7:30 a.m. or just something. You just try to figure it out, because clearly he was interested if he was good enough to call you. Joanne, I see your comment. Thank you for that. Yeah, I agree. It does take time. This is, but just keep in mind these teams who've done this in the national program, they do 10 interviews a week somehow or other. They make it happen. Now they're just dedicated to doing the program. So that's not what you're doing. But yeah, it's a time consuming thing. I agree. I mean, and you can send out, 100 emails and get 3 responses back, but then you've got 3 responses. So no one said this is easy, but it's absolutely essential. And people who do this, who've done this and, pushed maybe by my classes, afterwards, they never stop. They just keep doing it because they recognize that this is the only way they're going to get things right. Okay, Chun, go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, this is really a question for Wei. Oh, what's your average time for your interviews? How long it took you?
For me, okay, yeah, sure. About an hour, because to be honest with you, all our interviews are serving multiple purposes. Because on one hand, we usually just open with the open question about what's the need and what the person we talk to sees the problem is, and then we actually do our pitch, and then and so we talk about, because one of the purposes of this interview is also to recruit collaborators, and so after that we have some further discussion and things like that. So usually an hour. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so you can, regardless of how he used the time, he was able to get an hour. So that's important information. If people are interested in what you're talking about, they're going to be very happy to spend the time. And again, you're listening, and people love to talk about themselves and their world and so on. So, okay, we need to move on. Thank you, everybody, for the feedback. It's very useful. I'll think about how to address that as well next time I do this. So today we're going to talk about investment, and I'm guessing that a lot of you are here maybe just to hear this because you think, look, I've got something great. I don't want to do all this other stuff. I just want to go out and talk to VCs. Is there anyone who fits that? Yeah, I know that's the way it is, at least in my faculty. So I just want to remind you how to decide when you're ready to raise money. It's probably not when you think. And hopefully I've given you some windows into what's important during the earlier parts of this class. So first of all, you need to understand your market. That's customer discovery. That's why I keep pressing on that. It's the best way to do it. You have to have a strong value proposition, and we talked about that. What is the value to whoever is going to be buying this, whether it's a pharma, whether it's an insurer, whether it's a hospital system? Remember, it's not the patient, and it's really not the doctor either, because he's not paying. The doctor is an influencer. You should have some sort of early proof of concept. I mean, that could be in vitro, because you're looking for very early money. Of course, it'd be best if you have it in vivo, but something that says, look, I've got this idea, and while it's early days, we've shown it has really interesting efficacy in these assays. You should have defined your plan going forward. So this is not just give me some money and I'll figure it out. It's, I need to raise $350,000 to get to the mouse study that's going to show efficacy. So something that validates what you're doing, a milestone in a reasonable period of time. And something I'm always struck by, I'll tell you a story about an entrepreneur I'm working with. She's just finishing her PhD. And she has, what's really interesting science. And I said to her, when are you going to have mouse data? And she said, oh, well, I haven't really planned on that. And I said, well, what's, your proof of concept? You don't have a proof of concept. You've got an idea. It's interesting, but you need some sort of validation. And she said, well, I guess I could get a mouse study in 2 years. And I said, no, we're not in academia anymore. We're trying to do a company. That's not how the commercial world works. You need to come up with something. My challenge to you is, what can you do in 6 to 9 months? And go figure it out. Let's lay out the steps and talk about it. So, outside academia is a completely different time frame, and nobody has that kind of time to wait while you work on figuring out your milestone. So you need a plan. You should have a team identified. One of the most important things for investors is that they're investing in a team. They don't necessarily have to be on board, because it's not really fair to ask them to quit their paying job and join your startup, which has no money. But you can identify them and say, when we have raised funding, this team is going to be jumping into the company. And then you have to have filed IP. So you never want to get out there talking to investors without having some IP filed. Okay, really important when you're ready. And I'll take questions in the chat, by the way. So you probably all know this. There are 2 types of capital. There's non-dilutive, which is the type you really want to get because you don't have to give up any equity. And then there's dilutive, which is where most sources are going to be playing. So you do what you can with non-dilutive, and then at some point you're transitioning to giving up equity. I have a startup that's working on a diagnostic, and they have gotten 11 separate grants from the NIH, the NSF, DOD, et cetera, et cetera. They've raised something like $5.5 million through grants. They're very clever. They've done all of this without having to dilute their ownership. And now they're talking about raising a Series A, which will be dilutive. So don't forget that there are grants and loans out there. So what's going on out there? I mean, someone asked me this question a class or 2 ago, and I had a so-so answer, and I wanted to spend some time researching it and finding out exactly where all this money came from. And I think I've now got a good response to share with you. First of all, the stock market boomed in 2019. All the major indexes hit record highs, best annual return in 6 years. And, the economy was doing great, and there was trade optimism on Wall Street. And then in 2020, COVID hit, and miraculously, we had another good year. And so this led to strong performance for venture capital portfolios. And then they exited through record IPOs. So an exit when they got basically the money back that they had invested, and then a bunch more because they did well. They suddenly had a lot of cash that they can't sit on cash. They need to invest it. That's what VCs are. That's how VCs are structured. So that was first. Then in addition, there were all these new VCs that showed up, the micro cap. And there were even nano cap. So under $50 million, a typical VC would have a fund of 300, 500, $1 billion. These little VCs, which were sometimes maybe just 2 partners, suddenly appeared, and you couldn't even keep track of all of them. So they're there, and they presented increased competition for deals. And then on top of that, there were these crossover investors. So investors who typically invested in public companies decided to reach backward into private companies. So their competition. Then there was more interest in seed stage. So there are very early stage. This is a good thing for us by the venture capitalists, and some famous ones. A16Z is Andreessen Horowitz, which if you know your VC names, it's one of the top Silicon Valley VCs. They set up a $400 million fund just for seed. There are big funds like billions of dollars, and a bunch of others got interested in seed. And then there were all these non-traditional investors who showed up. So corporate venture capital, that's CVC, they've been investing, but even more so hedge funds, private equities, sovereign wealth funds, and so on. So, oh my gosh, there are all these competitors suddenly flooding the market, lots of cash around, and then that pushed deal prices up. So that's why you'll see that that deal prices and investments all have gotten much, much higher over the last year or two. Okay, so most of the stats are on all deals, but here's one on biotech and healthcare investment. So very apropos to us, and you can see in 2021, this was 3/4 is over $100 billion, so huge. Biotech seed valuations increase. So a valuation is how the market views the value of your company. And today, this early stage, which used to be, really pushed down, things were not worth very much, but it's now become like the late stage used to be in the old days. So the median early stage valuation last year jumped 50% to $45 million. And this was higher than the late stage just a few years ago, just all because of this tsunami of capital that's flooded into the venture. And then on top of this, venture capital has a lot of what's called dry powder, which is they do an initial investment, and then they save maybe 2/3 of the amount of money they're willing to allocate to a deal that's looking good. They save it for later on. That's called dry powder. So that has also increased valuations, knowing there's all that money back there. So that's some of what's going on. And then on, angel, we're going to be talking about angel deals, and angel and seed VCs, they're sort of the same. It's really hard to differentiate between them. But so here they're combined, and there are almost 7,000 of those in last year. So this is all deals, not just biotech. So where do you find capital? We now know there's tons of capital around. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be easy. So let's talk about where the different sources are, and there are quite a few of them. And we're going to hit on most of these as I keep talking. And again, please put questions in the chat. So first of all, there's self-funding. Everyone knows about that. You maybe max out a few credit cards, keep doing an experiment or whatever if you can't get funds elsewhere. Family and friends, we'll talk about that. Government grants, accelerators, angels, venture capital, family offices, which are rich people who set up an office to invest, disease foundations, and non-traditional sources. So first, family and friends. I don't know if any of you used family and friend money. Maybe you could put it in the chat. This is the way a lot of people get started. And you go to your mom and dad, your uncle, your cousin, whoever it was, a tech entrepreneur in Silicon Valley who's sitting on a bunch of cash, and ask them, hey, I'm starting this company. I just need $50,000 to get some stuff done. Can you help me out? And they all want to help, right? So, and they're not going to make it difficult for you. So they'll probably set it up as a loan and give you a very low interest rate, and they're just happy to help. But there's a problem with that, and the problem is that Xuzheng might be able to give us some feedback. They're not sophisticated in doing startups. So, what happens when you do a startup, things never go according to plan. And then when you have to go and sit at Thanksgiving dinner and say, gee, I'm so sorry, cousin Jay, but it looks like I'm not going to be able to give you that 50,000 back. It makes for problems, and then there are all these family dynamics. So you do it with a price. Yeah, Xuzheng, what do you think? How did that work out for you? I can't see if you're trying to speak. Can you share? You're on mute. That's why we can't hear you.
So this happened, sorry about that. This happened like 11 years ago, actually. So we started the company and several of us co-founders, and we started incorporated, and but we need a little bit things at the start. So basically 4 of our co-founders decided to each of us give out, depends on, the capability, right? So some of us want to have like 25%, some of them, provide more money, 50%. So I just put some my own money and also my brother's money, and we put something there. So and then we started in Houston, but later on it moved to California. Still, the company's still there, so we're still running.
And did that work out okay?
Yeah, and then later on we got some grant from from NIH and also some private companies. So
you had a good experience.
Yeah, I mean it's not. I think it's not at a stage of getting sold, but yeah, it's just still going.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good. Thanks for sharing that, Russell. Yeah. Can you share with us?
Yeah, I've done multiple friends and families. Some worked out horribly, and a couple worked out really, really well. The horrible ones are just horrible. I mean, there's nothing more to say about it. Actually, I got divorced over one. So they're difficult, and when it doesn't work out, it just makes the dynamics inside the family really, really difficult, and you do lose friends over it. I've had, the latest raise, we have family and friends, and one of my closest friends said, "Hey, look, I don't want to do this because you're my friend. And if something goes wrong, I don't want anything to stop that." So it is kind of difficult as far as you've got to be pretty sure that it's going to work. As in our business, obviously, we can't be sure. And what I try and do is say, look, here's the thing. You've got to throw this money away. You've got to only put in the money that you think that you can afford to lose, because I don't want you coming after me every month, as you know, every gathering. Hey, how's it going? And having to report all the time. And if you lose, I really don't want to have that horrible feeling that we just didn't quite.
Yeah.
We lose our friendship because it didn't quite work out. So it's an easy way to get money. There's no doubt about that. But the ramifications can be pretty horrendous.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah. So
this is George. So Stephanie, I like very much this idea. Now the point is, this maybe works when you have bright software ideas and so on, but for getting into therapeutics, the costs are very high. So I would say only very rich families can afford to put down a $500,000 check or something in this level.
That would not be the right level, George, for friends and family.
So for a lot of businesses that we are doing, I think family and friends, much more. I don't think it's getting on the plate. So the costs are far too much, and exactly what it was said. You are putting at risk family connections, friends connections. So for most of us, I would start after. I would start from SBIR and STTR. So from the next.
Great. Yeah, we'll get to that. So you would not raise $500,000 from friends and family. We're talking here about little bites, maybe just enough to get a key experiment done or something of that sort. Think 10,000, 25,000, 50,000. That's sort of where this fits. So you're right. You can't, you'd have to be in a super rich family to go for more. So let's move on. And Russell, to your question of, was my list in some order? Yes, it was, about things to sort of the earliest stage to things that should happen later on. This is the list of sources of capital. So how many of you have actually applied or currently have one of these government grants? Can you raise hands? Do you have? I wish I could see everybody. Okay. Oh, all right. So there are a bunch of you, I think. Great. So, you probably know all this, but for those of you who haven't, let me make sure I give you some of the basics. This is a great way to get started. The US government gives money to startups and there's no strings attached to it. It's free money, as we like to say. It's not dilutive. It's competitive, but everybody in this cohort should be able to write a good grant application. You guys are at some of the top institutions in the country. So it's just a matter of getting educated enough about how to do this. This is, the federal government has a need to translate all the IP and get technological innovation going. And, they have all these other objectives. In any event, this is something that has been embedded in the government. It's a very small percentage of R&D budgets, like 3.4%, something of that sort, but it's still a decent amount of money. Where's my computer? Okay. So there are requirements to get an SBIR, STTR. I often get questions about this because so many people in my network are not US citizens. So first of all, it has to be a for-profit company. It has to be US owned and operated. That means 51% or more. It has to be small. The work has to be done in the US. That means you can't subcontract things to China or India or other low-cost places in the world. And you're supposed to be performing R&D. So they're trying to get to boost R&D. The SBIR, which is where most of my experience is, and I am an SBIR reviewer for the NIH, is to facilitate technological innovation through startups specifically. And there's a lot of confusion about whether you have to have a company to apply. The answer is you do not. I triple check this with the website because there's so much confusion. So you don't have to run out and incorporate. If you get the money, yes, you have to incorporate. The money is pretty good, and in fact has been increased over the last few years. So a phase 1, which is focused on progressing the science, is now close to $300,000. You should use it in 6 to 12 months, and it's competitive. So at the NIH, only 12% of the applications are funded. Phase 2, which is up to $1.8 million over 2 years. I mean, that's a pretty good chunk of change, even in our world. And you do better in terms of getting funded. By the NIH, the percentage is 26%. Now, phase 2, I'm a phase 2 reviewer. I'll tell you what I look for is evidence that companies have done customer discovery. I want a business plan that's based on real feedback from the marketplace. So again, I'm telling you the importance of it. There's also a combined phase 1 and phase 2. I don't have the stats on that. It means you apply once and you get all the money. It's risky. I've reviewed a bunch of those, and some of those, they're okay for the science that would be done. They really fall apart on the phase 2 commercialization plan. So I vote against them. So there's some background. The one I know less about is the STTR, which is where you can collaborate with a nonprofit research institution. That institution has to do 30% of the work. The PI can work for that research institution. So those of you who are, have no intent of leaving, but you want to be involved in this and do the research, this is one route to go. There's an IP agreement, so now the IP is shared between the research institution and the company, and that's not something that investors really like a lot of the time. So just be aware that there is some downside to doing it this way. So, and here I'll leave this for you to read another time, but that's where the details about the difference between the two are. Any questions about government money?
Yeah, I have one. So, so you said that officially, so the actual company is not needed, but in reality, do you have any statistics saying that, some people they didn't really have company, but they got SBR? I thought because the usually during the review, they will look at this company profile, say, okay, how many years have been incorporated, how many people are there, whether it's only a shell company or actually it's an actual company. I thought that's one of the important factors.
Okay, glad you asked that. And since I'm a reviewer, I can answer this definitively. No, we don't look at the company itself. We look at the bios of the people who will be in the company. We look at the budget of how they're going to spend the money. We look at the research proposal and what's called specific aims. And then whether we think that those are viable. And what else do we look at? We look at, those are probably the major things. How innovative is the technology and so on. And then for the phase twos, how good is the commercialization plan? So if you're going for a phase two, you have to have had a company already. It's phase ones that where you don't have to have it until the money comes in. So I know people are always in a rush to got to form a company. I got to form a company. I got to get a lawyer. That's really not necessary until you're ready to take money. And when you're ready to take money, you can form a company in less than a day. I mean, you can actually form it online in an hour if you need to. So it's not a big deal.
Jacques, is there any actual statistics showing that, okay, so this company that didn't exist, but it got to the SBR? I mean, do they have this kind of statistics?
I don't know. I mean, they're not going to ship you the money unless you have a company. So,
Xuxing, I'll jump in here real quick. You actually, in order to even apply, you have to have an SBI. You have to have a corporate entity. There's a couple registration steps you have to go through. It'll take like a month or two to actually get them all done. And so it's not actually possible to apply for SBIR, STTR without having a company.
Oh, Sarah, we need to talk offline. I'm going to send you to the website.
Yeah. The other, unless they've changed it substantively, we have the NIH and NCI director, program managers come by and spend a little time with us every year. And then the other thing I wanted to say is for NCI, for therapeutics, just FYI for all of y'all, the hard caps, they actually get an exception even to the hard caps. The last I saw the updated numbers, the limits were 400K for phase one and 2 million for phase two. So just because they have the public numbers and then the not public numbers of what you can actually apply for. And we're going to be talking about all of the SBIR, STTR, and CPRIT funding on the 14th and 15th. So just keep that in mind.
Jacques.
So yeah, I guess I'm confused about the role of the PI here on the grant for the SBIR. So for PI, we're starting a company with business partners. The PI of the group or the science could not be the PI on the grant because he's not employed by the company. So the PI on the grant would be the business partner, or?
I'm going to defer that. Maybe Sarah will pick that up later as a question. I'm not in the weeds on this. So I don't deal with STTR as much. Yeah.
Yeah. So for the STTR, the PI can be you, Jacques, for example.
Yeah.
For SBIR, it could be a postdoc or something that's going to join the company, right? It has to be someone who will be in the company at the time that the award is made, right? So at the time that they give you the money, that person has to be over 50%. But you can have that would be your correspondence PI. You can have a co-PI, I believe, that would be you, and that helps add the credibility and such.
Okay, thank you.
Could be your business partner as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Sarah, I think you and I should resolve this offline because that's not the information I've got. So let's not leave everybody totally confused and get back to them with confirmation. Okay, onward. So another source of capital that maybe people aren't thinking about is commercial accelerators. So, and the model I'm using is different than the TMCI model, as I understand it. This is a very famous accelerator based in Silicon Valley that's called Y Combinator. And it's actually known throughout the world. It was probably the first accelerator. It started out as a tech accelerator. And over the last few years, it started a biotech track. And it keeps morphing because they're still experimenting with what actually works, but it's extremely competitive, 2% acceptance rate. And they literally get applications throughout the world. So the concept of this accelerator is that you're there for a limited amount of time, and they keep changing what that is. So I wasn't able to find what it currently is, but it's for biotech, it's either 6 months or maybe longer, maybe shorter. For a tech company, it's 3 months. And the idea is you get to a milestone in that time period. So they really push you hard, which is, a good thing. Because they keep you laser focused on getting to a milestone. That's what they want you to present to investors. They give you mentoring, they give you lots of pitch training. You actually keep on, the timing keeps getting shorter and shorter as they get more and more companies. The last time I went to this, it was 2.5 minutes per pitch. So just enough to tantalize an investor to find out more. I think that might be even less right now. They have a very large pitch event, but look at this bottom line. They'll put in $500,000. So, this is serious money. They take 7% for the first 125,000, and then there's a formula for the rest of it. Basically, they get this whatever terms that you negotiate with other investors later on. SAFE is their particular way. It's a debt instrument that has gotten pretty well known around here, and I'm not going to go into the details of it right now. But basically, they're taking 7% of you now, and then the rest is based on what is negotiated later on with other investors. This is a picture of their demo day, which now goes over 2 days. I've been there, I've sat in that room, it's huge. I'd say that every investor in Silicon Valley shows up, and people fly in from New York and London and all over the place just to go to this event, and then they have meetings with companies. So I've had a company go through this. It was several years ago. He didn't get $500,000. I've got a company that's in this cohort that just started in January, and he is getting the $500,000. So I'm really curious to see what happens with him. But just wanted you to know there's a different model out there. And in fact, there are a bunch of accelerators around, and some people accelerator hop. They go to multiple accelerators. Of course, they're giving up equity each time, but they feel like they're gaining so much by getting exposure to a lot of investors. And I've had teams at, I think all of these, all of these. And they all have their different strengths. Like Cedars-Sinai introduces you to their hospital purchasing people and so on. So Illumina is, sequencing. So if you have a heavy computational startup, you might want to try that one and so on. Any questions there? Xujing, I think you've got your hand up from before, not sure, but any questions, accelerators? All right, then we'll move on to angels. All right, angels. So angel investors are really important for early stage companies. They are willing to invest before venture capital. And they're high net worth individuals. They're usually people that have had some sort of success in their career. They might have been an industry executive. They might have been an entrepreneur. They might have been in tech and made a lot of money that way, and now want to do something in biotech, to do something for the world. And people have all kinds of motivations for doing this. And they can invest just one-offs, just as an individual, or there are many angel groups that have come together where people, a number of angels come and they hear pitches, and then they might invest together, or they might invest separately. Each angel group has its own way of investing. There's a social aspect to it. They, sometimes just like to hang out, and it's nice to have other people to talk to. And there's also diligence. So maybe they share diligence. If you're in a group, there are people with all kinds of different expertise, and they can make the diligence stronger. So lots of different models. And they also, it's not hands off for the, I can't tell you how many, but many of them like to mentor. They want to be involved with the company, and they can be very helpful depending on who they are. They can share connections, they can give you coaching, they can mentor the team. For all this, they take 20 to 30% in equity. And it used to be that they were willing to, and there probably are still angels out there who take this as convertible debt, meaning that they'll, it starts out as a loan, and then when you raise your A round, the first institutional or venture capital round, it translates into equity at a discount to the price that the first investors get. You get the discount for having come in early. But today, there's, at least what I see here, is people don't really want to do this debt thing. They just want equity from the beginning. Why do they do it? Well, a lot of it is just personal motivation. As an example, someone who's had a particular disease, let's say cancer, they might want to invest in an oncology startup and try to progress it in a meaningful way. So there's always, if they didn't have cancer, if someone in the family might have, it can be very personal. Whereas for venture capital, it's not personal. They also may have domain expertise and just want to share it. And, it's like, well, look, I was CEO of Genentech for a long time, and now I'm retired and I'm kind of bored, and I know all this stuff, and I could be helpful to some startups. And then there's just humanitarian reasons. They just want to do good for the world. So lots of different ways that people engage. And, if you were to meet an individual angel investor, you'd certainly want to understand what their motivation is, because that's going to play into their decision to invest. So when do you think about doing an angel round? So angel rounds are best for smaller amounts. I've given you a range here. Often I hear angel groups say, our group wants, our sweet spot is 250,000. We might go up to 500 if it's a really great deal. There are outliers who go up to $1 million, but for the most part, this is meant to just move you along to more validation of your idea, to get to some milestone where you become attractive to bring in other types of investors, including venture capital. Venture capital talks about wanting to come in really early. I always ask, what do you mean by that? And, it usually doesn't mean where my startups are. They're, well, really early, you must have some proof of concept and, whatever. So angels will come in earlier, and for that, they want to get rewarded. Also, you can't apply for an SBIR if you're 51% or more venture capital funded. So, your strategy could be, well, go get some angel investment. At the same time, I'm going to apply for an SBIR. Hopefully that comes in, then I can progress the science with even more money. In the meantime, I've got some angel capital that's going to help me take it a bit further. So that's why you should go to an angel or angel group and think of them before venture capital. Any questions so far? Good, Yogesh, go ahead.
So how the reviewers or agencies this question is about non-dilutive funding. So how government agencies view a company who is already funded through SBIR, and then you're looking for like if company is funded by SBIR and they are looking additional funds through CPRIT, for example, how the application is viewed in that regard.
Sarah, do you want to take that one?
Can you repeat the question? I apologize. I was trying to answer some questions in the chat.
Okay. He was
Yeah,
asking if you've got an SBIR, will CPRIT like that or not like that?
CPRIT's totally okay with it. So those match, frankly, so the match can be from any source, including SBIR. They're quite proud of that. It can be from private grants or foundations. Frankly, the majority of awardees that I've seen, it is the majority of the funds do come from VC, but it's not a strict requirement that it has to be VC. Just as a quick note too, the VC, unless they've changed the rules, you actually can be, you can be in fact majority VC owned as long as they're American, as long as you're majority American entity owned, and you still fulfill the small business requirements, including affiliates and such. So it can get quite complex, and it can't be any single VC. It has to be multiple VCs. So.
Okay, again, we have different impressions. I took this straight off their what they say. So maybe the reality is
yeah,
different.
Stephanie. No, I think some of the challenges there's actually there's special rules for NCI. The NCI has quite a few exceptions because particularly when it pertains to therapeutics.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I did not look specifically at NCI. Yeah. Okay, great. Okay. Any questions about angels so far? I've got a few more things to tell you about. So I went to an angel group on Monday night. I'm sometimes invited to angel groups, and I'm not going to tell you exactly who they are, but they're from a top university. They're alumni. They define themselves as deep tech, which includes life science. And it turned out that I think almost everything was life science on Monday night. So these are some of the stats that they put out during the meeting, that they choose 153 companies to present each year that out of over 1,200 applications. So you can do the math there. And in every meeting, you get 3 to 5 presentations. So they screen them pretty carefully to get into a meeting. They do not, while they're an angel group, it's each individual's decision whether or not they want to invest. So they don't have a fund, they don't have, which some angel groups do. They don't have a vehicle to have everyone invest in one way. So everybody makes up their mind. And then the evaluation you fill out right after the presentations are, how do you rate the team? That's number 1. How do you rate the technology? Number 2, and how do you rate the market? Number 3, and their market understanding. So of these presenters, 30% get an investment, which is 4% of applicants. So very competitive, not as competitive as Y Combinator at 2%, but very competitive. So, you have a very small chance of getting in. The average investment's $190,000, but they've gone up to 1.5 million for something they really liked. And then as they track their exits, which is how they track success, they got exits from 42 investments they make mainly at the very early stage, but then they've made 1 or 2 at Series A, Series B, and so on. And their ROI, return on investment, for those exits is 52%. So they're doing pretty well on the returns. So this is one real example from this week of an angel group. That's quite impressive, I think. And then they all talk to each other, and they after the presentations, we excused all the presenters, and then asked, we gave feedback and what did we like, and it turned out that everybody really liked one deal and not so much all the others. And so they're going to pursue that and learn more. And these are some statistics that are more general deal flow statistics. So, 1 in 10 get to pre-screening. Then from that, 1 in 20 get to actual screening. 1 in 40 get to due diligence. And I got to tell you that angel investors are very sophisticated. So in the old days, angels could be like, you know, a physician, a lawyer, whatever. Now it's, you know, at least in the groups that I know, there are people with industry experience, investment experience. They've been entrepreneurs themselves. They may be an expert in some domain field. Yeah, it's kind of amazing how much expertise there is in these rooms. So when you do diligence, they can always find the right people. Then 1 in 100 get to an actual investment meeting where the decision is made whether or not to invest, and then 1 to 2% actually get investment. So again, very competitive, but definitely something to explore. And it's all about an exit. So along with all these investors, they want to get their money back. So I remember someone asked me a long time ago, maybe not so long ago, well, what if they really fall in love with my technology and they just want to stay in the company? And it's like, no, they don't. They want their money out. You know, maybe they'll, you know, help you out in some other way, but pay them back first. So this is just the beginning of the exit list. It's a long list from Life Science Angels, which is a major angel group here that I work with a lot, and they have a long list. So versus venture capital. Okay, so why angels? First of all, angels are individuals' money versus institutional, and that makes a big difference. It's a completely different mindset. They have completely different requirements. Angels want to make money, but they may have other motivations as well. Institutional have to make money, and their motivations are they've got to show returns on their portfolio. Also, the decision process is very different. As an angel, you can just decide. And if you're a venture capital, you have to go to the venture capital partnership. I'll explain that in a minute. So it's a group decision. The amount of investment is lower in angels, we know that. Some angels will take convertible debt versus equity. Convertible debt is more founder friendly. You don't have to value the company, first of all. You don't have to negotiate the valuation and the equity percentage. So if you can possibly get it, that's a good thing. Venture capital only takes equity. Angels may want a board seat, but not necessarily. They may be happy being some sort of on an advisory board or nothing. Venture capital will take a board seat and then they'll invest earlier. So any questions about the differences right now or anything about angels? I see a hand, Joanna.
I just had a question for you. What I've been seeing, you know, that I think these are the classic lines between what is an angel versus venture capital, but I kind of find out there in dealing with these groups that they're very blurred now. And I think there are angels that are going up into the multiple millions in investment, and they want to see it all the way through if you're going to do an exit within 5 years. They don't want venture capitalists to come in at the end. I see venture capitalists that are kind of willing to jump in earlier and do smaller and do a convertible note. And so I just wanted your opinion on that. Are you seeing that where it's kind of like you're getting hybrids all out there rather than the classic A or B?
Yeah, great comment. Sure, things have changed. Things are more fluid. There are super angels who might invest 5 million in something. There aren't that many of them, but they exist. So there are all kinds of different combinations, and venture capitalists will often have an angel fund on the side so that they can invest differently. They don't have to go to the partnership and so on. So yeah, so good. You've obviously been out looking for money. Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for mentioning that. So yeah, I'm giving you sort of the so-called norm, but there are definitely exceptions. Any other questions about angels before we move on to venture capital? And you can put them in the chat if you're not ready to ask out loud, but let's move forward. This is just where you find angels. If you don't know, this is a list of places you can look, but it's, you know, like everything else, it's networking. So use your networks, and probably TNCI has a pretty good network, I would be guessing. Okay, so before we get to venture capital, something called family offices, which have just become visible over the last few years. So these are the offices of very wealthy individuals. They'd have assets over 100 million of that they can invest. And they set up a whole infrastructure. They can have like physical office space with lawyers and accountants and investment professionals and people to do market research. And, you know, it's like a whole big operation in some cases. And they can invest for one or more families. So now that they've got all this big infrastructure, I know of some that actually I know somebody who, I guess he consults for 6 families in Switzerland. So he's has a scientific background, and so he shares his time. A family office could just take the lead on a number of different families. In fact, they average 27 investments per family office. They could focus on just one thing. It really is very individual. It depends on what the family wants. So, you know, sometimes there are families who've been hit by cancer and all they want are cancer investments. And then there are other families with different requirements. There's a lot of personal motivation, as you can imagine. These are not easy to find. They don't generally don't come to conferences. They're sort of under the radar. If they come to a conference, they may not have a badge on with the name of their family office. They just sort of float around on their own. So again, it's hard to find, but there are ways to network. Here's a very famous family office. This is Steve Jobs' family office. It's got, as you might guess, it's got a huge amount of assets, not specified, and it's got a very large staff. I had a picture of them. They're like filled the screen, the number of people. The good news is they're interested in cancer. And so I don't know how many of you have approached them or have connections into them. I know there are people at UCSF who have, but they invest in cancer all along the pipeline. They say all types of cancer and modalities. Chun, question?
That's just a comment. They actually give out the grants. We have a grant from Emerson Collective. It's a Steve Jobs family.
Oh, great. And is it for a specific program that you're working on? Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. Well, then you're a good connection. Anyone who wants to approach them, go to Chun. All right, so there's a family office you can access. And then there are disease foundations. And again, this has emerged in the last years. And I think one of the most famous deals is Vertex in cystic fibrosis. Got an early deal with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. The CF Foundation invested $75 million. It's come back in spades to them. It's been a tremendous investment. It was early on and when Vertex was just getting into that indication. And it was good for everyone. This is Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation, and you know they all act differently, but they leverage private capital. They build a portfolio of investments. They never give the capital back. It's a venture philanthropy. The money goes back into the foundation if there's anything to be gained from the investment. So again, I'm sure there are multiple, no pun intended, many foundations that approach cancer and maybe have this model. Okay, finally at venture capital. I hope I've shown you that there are many routes to raising capital. You may or may not be ready for venture capital. Many of you are too early. So, but let's learn how this works. So their money comes from institutions. So for instance, the University of California Pension Fund invests, endowments, foundations, banks. This is big money these institutions will allocate a small percentage of their funds to venture capital, like 10%. But it's an important asset class and one that they're serious about investing. Venture capital funds, now we've seen nano funds that could be as small as 25 million or even less, to these huge funds that are over $1 billion. And so they're all over the place. If you're a large VC, you probably have 20 to 30 companies per fund. And so that's your portfolio. So you need to spread out your investments because you know most of them are going to crash and burn, but maybe you'll get one or two that are going to make back all that money you've invested and then make you money. The funds are structured to last for 10 years, but if you're a VC, you need an exit in 3 to 7 years. You have to, it takes you a while to find the investments after you raise the fund, you invest, then you need to see them progress, and then you need to get out. So that's pretty much the timeline. And again, you always want an exit. And I'm going to warn everyone, I may go 5 minutes over today, so I hope you can stay. This is what a fund structure looks like. So the venture capital firm is comprised of general partners and all kinds of other people who maybe are venture partners. They're not full partners in the firm, but they have a piece of whatever the firm makes. And then there are limited partners, and these are the investors we just talked about. So University of California Pension Fund would be a limited partner, as an example. CalPERS is another big fund here, limited partner, and so on. So they can have many limited partners. The venture capital fund itself is a limited partnership, and then it aggregates all the funds from their limited partners and invests them into different companies. And then, of course, they're going to have to create returns for these limited partners. The general partners get paid only when the limited partners have gotten paid. This is what it looks like in returns. So, it looks like venture capital does so well. They fly around first class. They've got all this money. But in fact, most startups, as you know, fail. And 50% of investments, according to this data, return less than 1 times the investment. So in other words, they lose money. They may return nothing, or they may return a fraction. 35% return 1 to 2 times, 10% return 2 to 3 times, and then let's say 5% return more than 3 times. And typically what they look for is 1 to 2 companies are going to pay back the whole fund and then make money for everyone. So that's a 10 to 20 times return. And venture capital funds are all judged on what kind of returns they provide to their limited partners. So it's not easy. And so why do all these startups fail? Just to remind you, it's that there was actually no market need. They chose the wrong business model, so they could never make a business out of it. The team just couldn't pull it off. Maybe they run out of money. They just can't raise more because they haven't hit any milestones, and there's no product market fit. These are all business reasons. And sure, yeah, our science fails, but you're probably not going to get far enough along to find that out when you're raising money. You're not going to hit phase 2 before you're raising money from venture capital. And there are different flavors of venture capital firms. So there are all these private VC firms that have multiple limited partners. And this is a list of some of the better known firms. So they're standalone firms that all they do is raise money for funds and invest that money into companies, usually startups. They're not terribly risk oriented, so that's why they want to invest a little bit later. They'd rather that you decrease the risk for them and then they can come in, with some notable exceptions. Then there are corporate VCs. So that's like Novartis Venture Fund, which this slide came from David Marrus, who is a partner there. So Novartis has a fund, Merck has a fund, GSK. I mean, basically all the pharmas now have venture funds. And their dynamics are different. All they have to do is satisfy the pharma's needs. And sometimes the fund, probably often the fund is strategic, meaning, you know, this is the areas that the pharma has decided they want to focus on, and they're looking for investments that that are in that area that they could potentially maybe do deals with later on, maybe acquire later on. So it's all in line with the corporate strategy. And then there are some funds that are just financial. They're non-strategic. They're like, we can invest in anything. It doesn't matter what GSK is working on. We, as this fund, have the freedom to just make good investments and make money. And, you know, who knows, maybe someday the pharma will change its mind and decide this is an interesting area, but we're gonna invest in really cool stuff. So those are the different types of firms. You know, the pre-money valuation, meaning before venture capital is raised, has gone way up. So these are biopharma, early stage VC pre-money valuations as of the end of last year. If you look at the average, look how, that's the dotted line. Look how far up it's gone. Oh my God. And then there are, you know, the median is 42 million, but the average is over 100. I mean, this has gotten amazingly high. So here's data supporting what we know about the market. And then the average early stage deal size. So that was valuation, the value that the venture capitalist put onto the company. This is the size of the deal. In other words, what is invested, and it's over $20 million for the first time ever. So again, just supporting how much money there is and how things have gone crazy. These are the biotech lead investors last year. It's a kind of an interesting list. You know, it may not, I don't know, for those of you who know the investment world, it was sort of a different list than I expected. RA Capital Management is a Boston-based firm. Orbimed is in San Francisco, and I think they're based in New York. North Pond, I'd never heard of. It's in the DC area. Temasek is Singapore's sovereign wealth fund. And they're investing big in biotech. I've actually been talking to somebody there. Lilly Asia, guess where they're investing. Novo is a pharmaceutical company, and so on. So, but you can see who's doing the investing. At the bottom, Flagship Pioneering, they're the ones who invested in Moderna. They're sitting on a lot of money right now, right? So, and then we had talked about company creation a little while ago. You know, this is something that we're seeing more and more of. This deal just happened a few weeks ago. Arch Ventures raised $1.9 billion to create a company. This is an aging company. There's actually a UCSF PI who left to join this company and took other people with him. So, you know, they were the lead investor, and they brought a syndicate, other investors with them to raise this huge amount of money. It's called Altos Labs. They've got $3 billion invested in this company they're going to create from nothing. So, you know, we can't all do that. You have to be sought after to get there. Okay, so how can a VC help you? This is a slide presented by Novartis Venture Fund's partner who has taught for me. Look at the first thing he said: network, network, network. You know, VCs have huge networks and very valuable connections. They also have experience that they can bring to bear on your company. Some of them just have cadres of people they keep on staff to help the companies, and it's very valuable. They can give you access to capital. They have no other capital sources besides their own. They validate who you are. You know, if you can say, I got investment from this top tier set of venture capitalists, that really tells people you've got something cool. And then they bring you focus. They're disciplined, they mentor you, they critique you, they push you, they totally focus to move you along, and that's really a benefit. So that's the opinion of a VC about how they can help. What do they expect in return? They need to be able to syndicate their investment, in other words, they become the lead investor and then they bring in other investors, just as we saw Arch Venture did. So how good is your story? Can that attract other investment? And are the things specific, measurable, time-bound, and so on? They expect you to be transparent and to use their funds well. To communicate constantly about what's going on, to be totally honest, and they expect you to have a great team to work this through. So how do you get a VC to invest? His list: be compelling, be original, be clear, be ruthlessly focused, have an exit strategy. So even when you're first pitching a VC, you should have your exit strategy worked out in your plan. You know, I'm going to exit through a deal with pharma. I'm going to go for an IPO when I've reached this point, and so on. And be very, very specific, and don't be boring. So, you know, they like charismatic founders. They like people they want to work with and feel like, you know, they're going to be engaged with you for years. They want to like you as well as believe in you. And this is what success looks like. They need an exit. That's how they're judged. So that's how they're going to judge you. So just to summarize, right now there's a great fundraising environment. It may not last, but you've got to put your building blocks in place first. And you've got to do that customer discovery to be credible when you go out there. There are lots of different investor types, and you need to figure out what works for you, for where you're at and what your needs are. Many options to raise capital, and VC should come later. I wrote, unless you're super hot, you know, if you're doing a CRISPR company, you might want to go out right now, and whatever else is the flavor of the day. So I'll take questions in 1 minute. Just to remind everybody, we learned these key building blocks in this class: how to assess the opportunity, how to understand your market, what business model choices are, and what investors need. It was a good start. There's tons more to learn to get this right. I'm sure your program is going to cover an awful lot of what wasn't in this class, but I encourage you to stay plugged.